when I wear the Streakfly, you can see that my power expenditure is higher than Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a review of the Nike ZoomX Streakfly. So before we get started, these shoes were purchased with my own money on Nike.com and no one's paying me to do this review. So let's go over the specifications. For US men's size 9, it weighs 6 ounces. 33 millimeters on the heel, 26 millimeters on the forefoot. That gives you 6 millimeters of heel to toe drop. And for the upper, it's using an engineered mesh. It's super lightweight, super breathable, and they also are using a different type of shoestring as well, which is a skinnier version than their normal racing shoes. And then on the top of the foot, there is some padding to relieve the pressure from the shoelaces. And for the midsole, it's using Nike ZoomX foam with a shank in the midfoot area. For the outsole, it's using a wave tread pattern, which is different than their Vaporfly. So let's talk about the fit. Most of my Nike shoes are US men's size 9.5, which is what I ordered these in as well. But for some reason, these are a little bit longer than how they normally make them. So not only do I have like about a full thumb length of room in the front, but also all around my toes as well. So as you can see, if I have room from here expanding all the way to here, it gives me too much room to have a really nice and secure fit, which is what we want on a race day shoe. I think if you were to order these shoes, I would buy them half size down than your normal Nike sizing. And then for the feel, if you've raced in the Vaporfly or the Alphafly, you can relate to the unstable feel when you're just wearing the shoes, walking around. Your heel just feels really wobbly, right? For these shoes, the base is actually really wide. It may not look very wide, but it actually feels really secure. And so I did a couple races and workouts in these shoes with a lot of turning corners and hairpin turns, and I had absolutely no issues whatsoever with these shoes. They feel extremely nimble. They're very capable to make sudden stop and quick turns. And also these shoes are super light and responsive. As soon as your foot hit the ground, because of the midfoot shank, it helps you transition faster and then come back for another gait cycle. If you're the high cadence type of runner, you would really appreciate these shoes. So one of the debates in the running community is that whether or not these shoes are the replacement for the Nike Pegasus Turbo. So I have the Turbo 2s here, and to me, they are very different shoes. Granted, these are not race day shoes for me because we have carbon fiber plated super shoes now, and neither one of these have a plate in them, but they ride very differently. For these one, I still feel that they're much more comfortable, much more responsive, and there's more ground feel to these shoes. And as for these ones, these are way squishier than the Turbo 2s. Now that said, these shoes are probably faster because they're lighter, and these are using the ZoomX foam versus this is a combination of the ZoomX and React. So if I were to take it to a race or take it for a fast workout, these will probably be better. But for long-term use, I would still prefer the Turbos. So all that being said, these shoes kind of remind me of another pair of old shoes that I have. Is the original Brooks Hyperion. So this is before the Hyperion Elites, before the high stack and carbon fiber plate super shoes. I think I bought these maybe 4 or 5 years ago and ran my first marathon in these. Absolutely destroyed my legs because look at the stack. I think the first 4% might have just came out back then and I wasn't able to get a hold of it. But the reason that these kind of remind me of these guys is because the stack height is much lower than say the Vaporfly, so you get a little bit more ground feel. I wouldn't say that you get much more ground feel like these guys, but in terms of the control and the nimbleness of the shoes, these are way more similar to like the traditional style racing flats than the modern days super shoes. So let's talk about performance for a minute. Recently, I raced 4 5Ks in 8 weeks. The first one was a time trial / tune-up. Second one was also a tune-up, but I used a virtual race to run it. The third one was my goal race, and that was hot chocolate 15K, but I raced a 5K distance. And then for the last one, I raced a local 5K called Cupcake Fun Run. And so for each event, they were 2 weeks apart. For the first one, I wore the Vaporfly NEXT 2 and ran it at a track. And then for the second one, which was the virtual race, I ran it on a road with a hairpin turn, and I also ran it in the Vaporfly NEXT 2. Now for my goal race, hot chocolate 5K, I ran it in the ZoomX Streakfly because these are labeled as the 5K shoes. So I wanted to make a comparison and see how they perform compared to the Vaporfly NEXT 2. And then for the last one, I also raced in the Streakfly. So for all 4 events, I wore the Stryd power meter to collect some power data, and the numbers were really fascinating. So for the first 2 events, my power average output was about 270 watts. And for the latter 2, it was about 285. Now what's fascinating about the 270 and the 285 is how it correlates to the race performance. So for my first 2 races, the first one was 1756 and the second was 1830 with the Vaporfly. And then for the third race, which was my goal race, I ran it at 1755, and the last one was at 1804, and that's with the Streakfly. Over 8 weeks of span, my own fitness didn't change that much. It was always hovering around like the high 17s to the mid 18s. But when I wore the Streakfly, you can see that my power expenditure is higher than when I wore the Vaporfly. Because of that, I do think that there is an advantage to wear the super shoes on race day instead of the Streakfly. Now I'm not saying that you'll be able to run faster wearing the super shoes, but I do think that you can conserve more energy, especially when you're running the longer distances. So my final thoughts for these shoes. Would I wear them for race day? I would say probably not, especially if you have a pair of super shoes laying around somewhere. Now, with the exception of a very technical course. So I'm not talking about a lot of uphill and downhills, but if there's a lot of turns in the course, I do think that these shoes can handle turns better than the high stack shoes. But for longer distances, I think there is an advantage to use super shoes with the assistance of the plate to help you conserve energy. And finally, I haven't really found a good place for these shoes yet in my rotation. I mean, granted, these are fast day shoes, so I would still wear them for workouts. But for the longer efforts like tempo runs or a workout within a long run, I probably wouldn't wear these shoes. I probably would wear something that has a higher stack height. But I think these would be good for some repeats and strides, something that's about an hour or less. These shoes are comfortable. These are really fun to run in. And also, these are at a really good price point. I think that if you can get your hands on these shoes, I would definitely get them. All right, and that's all for my review. Thanks for watching my video, and I'll see you next time.